Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the first session on the third day of the conference. My name is Marius Pusta, and this is actually my first session in this tent here. And I didn't know that the noise of the wind is that strong, so please excuse that the color of my face looks like the gray shirt here. I feel like a ship on an open sea. So anyway, okay, so let's get started. Actually, this is to be used as a demo session. So it's a demo-only session. I have just a couple of slides. Usually they schedule these demo sessions right after lunch when people do not want to see too much slides because they are heavy and maybe a little bit boring. So there used to be as an alternation. Now we have this alternation in the morning. So I just called it a Good Morning Office Developer demo-only session. So please be aware that we are going to program all the time for this session. So we don't want to do too much PowerPoint. What we are going to do is we will extend Windows SharePoint services and Office clients using a variety of technologies. And yeah, these are the technologies that we are going to use. I will not explain the basics of these technologies, so we really step right into using these technologies and combining these technologies to build a solution. And that brings me right next to the agenda of the session. So we actually will start with taking a look at the business scenario. And while I explain the business scenario, I'll also explain the remaining parts of the agenda. The session objective, in my opinion, should be to share some ideas with you on how to use a variety of technologies to build nice solutions at the end of the day. So that's the idea of the session. Okay, so what is the business scenario? Who of you had a great breakfast? Okay. Who of you likes having a nice dinner in the evening with a cool glass of red wine and things like that? So me too, actually. And I know that having a great dinner hardly depends on the restaurant where you go to. So a great dinner at McDonald's or Burger King is maybe not that fine as it is in Moe's, as we hear it somewhere else. So I thought it might be nice building a solution around this scenario of people that are interested in good restaurants and having nice dinners there, and connecting them with restaurants through an online community based on Windows SharePoint services. So the idea is that the restaurant owners can publish information about their restaurants, descriptions, what the cuisine is, so the type of food and wine they are going to sell, and share it with gourmet interested people that then can query the information and maybe create things such as invitation letters for their friends and family. And that actually brings us to the agenda of the session. We will start from a SharePoint site that we'll take a look at in a minute, and we'll create the possibility for restaurant owners to publish information about their restaurants using a Office OpenXML Word document that has some business information about their restaurants embedded right into the document. And of course, that information is displayed on the web page on the one hand side, but on the other hand side, we will extend SharePoint web services to make the information about the restaurants available to client applications in an interoperable, strongly typed fashion. And then we will build a client application with Visual Studio Tools for Office, a Word add-in that allows the restaurant interested people to retrieve the information that we have stored in SharePoint about the restaurants, load it into a task pane in Word, and create nice invitation letters without using a copy and paste pattern. So by directly inserting the information from the task pane into the document. And finally, as this is used to be as an internet site, we will customize the authentication infrastructure of SharePoint to use ASP.NET Membership API. And of course, we need to customize the web service calls then as well to use Membership API and forms-based authentication as well. So that's the plan for this session, actually. that's all I have with PowerPoint slides. So we switch to my other machine right now. And I'm running the things in a virtual PC, so just be aware of that the performance sometimes is going to be terrific. Okay, so let's take a look at the community that we are going to start with. This is something that I've created up front. There is a custom list called regions that contains the regions. There is a custom list called cuisines that contains the cuisines. And there is a document library that allows restaurant owners to submit their restaurants. And maybe you know all the sessions are getting reviewed by a content team. And one of the SharePoint program managers asked me, do you show something of the out-of-the-box functionality, clicking around a little bit in SharePoint? And I said, well, I don't think this is appropriate for level 300 session. But he said, you have to show it, so I have to click a little bit around at the beginning of the session. So I say edit page. I've created a discussion board, and we add the discussion board to the site here, just to make it a full-blown community. And we drop that down, say modify shared web part, edit the current view, and we want to have the threaded view for the discussion board, so we say threading, and we change the style. So, okay. With that having done, I think I fulfilled the commitment of clicking a little bit around in SharePoint, did I? Okay. So, let's get to the real content, to the developer content. Let's get to the first part of the demo. Restaurants want to submit information about their restaurants to this document library. So let's play it one time and then look at the things behind the stuff. So I actually have bound a document template to this document library, and we will fill out one form, download the form, and take a little look at the inner workings of the form. So this is actually a Word 2007 document using Office OpenXML file formats. And we'll see that we'll have a couple of, or a few, content controls placed in there. So just give him a second to open up the Word form. I warned you about the terrific performance. So this Word form actually allows you to enter the name of the restaurant, test, restaurant, no, we take another one, Mo in Barcelona. Cuisine is Japanese. Who wants to go to a Japanese restaurant in Barcelona? Chef is the boss. Phone number is irrelevant. The boss at japaneseinbarcelona.com. Then we have a web page, japaneseinbarcelona.com. Blog, blogs.chip.com. Image URL. So I've uploaded a couple of photos on my machine. Localhost photos, photo1.jpg. And describe the restaurant. This is one of the best restaurants with Wiener Schnitzel, which is not very Japanese, but anyway. Please come to our restaurant. Maybe you get the Wiener Schnitzel with rice there. That's the Japanese part of it. So street is something, so we don't need to have something here. City, Barcelona, and then we have the country. So these are all content controls. And then we have some custom fields on our document library where we assign some meta information. And now I save the document. We have created our new restaurant, save it as a document on the document library. So, okay, close the Word document. And now we are going to download this document to our desktop. So we say, no, we don't say this. We say save target as. We go to our desktop and save it as new restaurant.docx. And we copy the new restaurant.docx and add the SIG extension, just to take a little look at the inner workings of the document. So actually what I've done is I've attached a custom XML with our own schema to the document, which is actually stored in the custom XML folder in one of these items. Accidentally, I have taken the right one, actually. So this is the information in our restaurant. So what I actually did is I created an empty XML and embedded it into the Office OpenXML file and bound the contents to the content controls that you have seen in the Word document. And for that purpose, I used a little tool called the Word Content Control Toolkit. This tool is available on CodePlex, which is our open source community portal for sharing components and things like that. And this tool actually allows you to create a new custom XML part. And when you have the new custom XML part, you can see it on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, you see the list of content controls. And then you just drag and drop them over to bind the content controls on the custom XML, which represents your business information stored right into the document. I prepared that because I thought you don't want to see me drag and dropping all the things from the right-hand pane to the left-hand pane. So that's the reason. But this is the tool. It's available for free, and I have used it to bind the content. Okay, so now we know that we have the things here available in our document library. And what we know we want to do next is we want to create a web service to actually retrieve this information from the documents using the SharePoint object model and return it through WSI Basic Profile 1.0 compliant web service interfaces to make sure that the interoperability with other platforms is given as well. So, but before we do that, I would like to create a little class that allows us to retrieve the custom XML from the Word document, actually, with a file, a SharePoint file in our hands already. So what I have in Visual Studio created already are 3 projects. One is the add-in for Word, and the other 2 projects are plain class libraries. The only thing that I did is I created the class library, I strong named them, and I created some skeletons of the classes that we will create now with the function prototypes in place already. And that's basically it. So the restaurant's lib library is the library where we want to build our document processor class. And this document processor class actually should contain a public method called getData, which actually returns a restaurant. But the problem is, when you take a look at here, it still does not recognize the type restaurant. So how do we get our type restaurant that conforms to the XML that is actually stored in the document? Well, what I did is I created an XML schema that is a representation of the XML type that is stored in the Office OpenXML. So what I'm going to do now is I create classes out of the schema using xsd.exe, classes, restaurant schema.xsd, and I copy restaurant schema.c# to restaurant's lib, and I include that one in my solution. So include the project, the file into our solution. So that's a very complicated operation. And now it recognizes the type. So what we want to do is we want to have a restaurant, rest equals now, and we return the restaurant. So in between, as you can see, we get a SharePoint file using the SharePoint object model as an input parameter. In between, we need to load the Office OpenXML package out of the SharePoint file into a system.io.packaging.package class and find the custom XML, deserialize it as a restaurant, and return the restaurant. So the steps are going to be open package file, create the method stub, Shift Alt F10. Then we say my package or package part root equals get root part. So the next step that I try to do is getting the root part of the package, which is the actual Word document, which contains the Word ML and all that stuff. Why am I doing that? Well, when you take a look at the package, there is a variety of custom XMLs. I could either directly access the custom XML through URI that is called /custom XML /item2.xml, but the problem is the fact that our custom restaurant XML is in item2 XML is just a random fact. So Word decides that based on some criteria, which we actually don't know in detail. So what we need to do is, so it happens actually on a random basis depending on which other items you bind to the Word document. So what we need to do is we need to have a strategy in place to somehow find the custom XML before we can deserialize it. And what I'm going to do is I just take the root part, which is the Word document, and this Word document actually has relationships in the Rails folder. They are much more interesting. Relationships to the other items, so custom XML item 3, custom XML item 2, and they are of a specific type. Great, we have a party here with the music. Schemas, OpenXML formats, org, Office document 2006, relationships, custom XML. So this is the type of the relationship. So what I'm going to do is I get my root document, get all the relationships of type custom XML to find out which custom XML parts are connected to my document. I walk through the relationships, load the actual package part, and verify if the XML namespace in my custom XML is my custom XML namespace of the restaurant schema for finding the things. So the next step actually, after I have retrieved the root part, is I say custom XML equals find restaurant custom XML based on the root part. And then I use the XML serializer, ser equals new type of restaurant, to deserialize the custom XML. String reader sr equals new string reader custom XML, and say rest equals restaurant serializer deserialize based on the string reader. And then I can return the restaurant. So what we need to do now is we need to implement these two methods. So, and of course the open package. So let's start with the open package. Usually you would probably expect me something like this based on the Office OpenXML file format things. Stream fs equals file.openBinary stream. So this is a method offered by the SharePoint object model. And we say, okay, my package equals package.open fs. But that won't work. That will actually lead to an exception at a much later point of time. Because when you start browsing through the parts of a package, you will figure out that the package in system.io.packaging of the Office OpenXML file formats requires streams with the possibility of free positioning. That means a stream that supports the seek method. But the stream that you get from a SharePoint file does not support the seek method. So what we need to do is we need to wrap it into a memory stream which supports seeking. So we say memory stream. We need a byte to transfer the bytes. That sounds really cool. So b equals new byte fs.length. And then we say fs.read into bytes 0b.length and ms.write b 0b.length. And then we load stuff based on the memory stream instead of the SharePoint file stream. Okay, so now we have opened the package through a memory stream. Next step is getting the root part, and for getting the root part, we do a simple hack. The root part is in /word/document.xml, so we say URI root URI equals new URI /word/document.xml URI kind.relative, and we say return my package.getPart root URI. Save. So that's getting the root part. The next step is actually finding the custom XML in our package based on the root part document.xml, which is connected with our custom XML. So what we do is we say package, we iterate through all the package relationships, package relationship collection, rels equals root.get relationships by type. And now, as a parameter, it requires me to pass in the type of the relationship, which is actually identified by a URI. And the URI is exactly the one that you find when you open up the rels XML file in the Office OpenXML package with the custom XML part, so in the URI. So what I did is I encapsulated that into a constant. So we have the custom XML relationship URI, which is OpenXML formats org Office document 2006 relationships custom XML. Okay, so we say constants.custom XML relationship URI. The next step is we go through the, for each, we go through the relationships item in rels. And for each relationship, we retrieve the package part. Part equals my package.getPart. So now the relationship contains a target URI, but the interesting thing with the target URI actually is that the target URI is relative to the source from where we retrieved the relationship collection. The source is /word/document.xml in our package, and the target is then /custom/XML/item_x.xml. And the get part method of the Office OpenXML package requires an absolute URI. So we need to have a possibility to resolve the absolute URI from the relative URI. And for that purpose, the OpenXML APIs include a package pack URI helper resolve URI method. And within here, we pass the source URI and the relative target URI, which returns actually then the absolute URI of our custom XML. Then we load the custom XML. So we say using stream reader sr equals new stream reader part.getStream. So we get the stream to the custom XML in our Office OpenXML package, and we say string XML xr read to end. So we read the stream. Then we do a little hack. So we verify if it's our XML by looking for the namespace TechEd 2007 restaurant schema. So we say if xml.contains constants.restaurant schema, restaurant namespace. And if that's true, then we say return XML. Then we returned the custom XML in our Office OpenXML package. So we just built that to see whether I've done some mistakes somewhere. Yes, not all code, not all paths return some result. So we return string.empty at the end of the function. Build succeeded. That was part one. We built a component that gets a SharePoint file, which is stored in a document library, which is actually our restaurants document library. We open it up in an Office OpenXML package, find the custom XML in it, deserialize it using XML serializer, and return it as a restaurant. But this component is nice, but at the moment we cannot use it so far. So the next step is actually we build a web service, and this web service gets integrated into the SharePoint web service side by side with all the other SharePoint web services to use this component to return a list of restaurants based on a QESIN filter, so based on the food type filter. So that's the next step. For building a web service in SharePoint, you need to custom web service. So first of all, why am I building a custom web service? Well, first, out of the box, there is no web service in SharePoint that allows you to retrieve contents from a document library and return the document itself to the web service client. Second, many of the web services from SharePoint are very, very generic. And therefore, some of them are not WSI compliant, which makes problems when you want to build interoperable things that need to interop with another platform. So this is, in my opinion, the much more important reason. So these are the reasons why we are going to build a custom web service. What do you need for building a custom web service? First, you create the class library. Second, you strong name the class library. I did that already. Third, you create a class that inherits from web service or is marked with the web service attribute. Then you add a reference to Microsoft.SharePoint.dll to have access to the SharePoint object model. And then you write your web service. So that's it. Yeah, and then you need an ASMX file. You deploy the ASMX file to the SharePoint program files directory, and then you are finished. So let's take a look at the web service view code. So we start with the web service. The web service should support two methods. One method for get cuisines and one method for get restaurants. Don't forget to use the enable sessions equals true if you want to use your web service with another type of authentication than Windows authentication. Because if you don't enable the session, the web service does not accept cookies, and therefore the authentication process, when you use forms of authentication, for example, would fail. Okay, but this is something that we're going to use at the end of the session. So we have get cuisines and we have get restaurants. So we return a list of cuisines, which are basically stored in our cuisines list on SharePoint. And then as a second function, we accept the cuisine as a parameter and we return filtered restaurants based on the cuisine. So let's do that and say, let's return the cuisines first because that's easier. We use the SharePoint object model now. We say sp-web equals sp-context.current.web. So we get a reference to the SharePoint web. sp-list cl equals web.getList, and getList requires us to pass in the URL of the list, which is why I added a parameter list here, list. So we have the list of cuisines now, and now we can, for each, sp-list item in cl.items, and we say cuisines.add item of cuisine.toString. So that's our list of cuisines. So this is actually a column in my list here, cuisine. So let's switch back. Now we are going to get to the more complex operation. Again, we need to have a reference to our web, sp-context.current.web, then sp-list, list equals web.getList, library URL, the URL to a document library. In SharePoint, actually, everything is a list, even the document library. But then we want to filter the restaurants based on the parameter cuisine that we passed in. So we use the SharePoint query engine, sp-query, query equals new query. Query has a query property that requires us to add an LDAP-like query, a WebDAV-like query, WebDAV-like query as a parameter. And I don't want to write this XML stuff right here now, so I drag and drop it in here. So the WebDAV query contains a where operator, an equals operator, then we add a reference to the field of the list, which is cuisine. Then we enter the value with which the operator should compare the list column of type text, and we add our parameter in here, and then we close the operation. So that's basically it, and I use string format. Of course, you should validate your parameter before you continue here. Okay, and then we say sp-list item collection items equals list.get items query. And then we say for each sp-list item in items. And for each item, we are doing the following thing. We add a restaurants.add to our restaurants list. And for that purpose, we need our document processor that we created before for reading the Office OpenXML file. And then we say processor.getData of the current list items file. And this is actually the thing that we are going to add to our list. So let's save this one. And then we return the list of restaurants. So we built that stuff to see if it's still working. Build succeeded. So we have now a web service that uses our document processor to retrieve a custom XML stored in an Office OpenXML file and return it as a list in a list of through the web service interface. So next we need to deploy the web service, and for that purpose we need an ASMX file. The ASMX file does contain nothing else than a web service directive with a reference to the class that we just created. And this ASMX file needs to be deployed to the program files, common files, Microsoft shared, web server extensions, 12, ISAPI. So I've prepared a batch file for deploying these things that first of all uses registers the assemblies that we just created in the global assembly cache. You also could put them to the _app_bin of your website directory, but then the assemblies can only be used within that website. So if you want to use it across multiple web applications in SharePoint, then you need to have it in a central location, for example, SharePoint, the global assembly cache. And then I copy the file actually to the program files, common files, Microsoft shared, web server extensions, 12, ISAPI, only the ASMX file. But when you take a look at, so this actually maps in a SharePoint web application, this actually maps to the VTI bin directory where all the other web services are located as well. And in the VTI bin directory, the retrieval of WSDL files and the testing of web services, especially the testing, is disabled. So what I'm going to do to be able to test the web service now using the web interfaces, the browser interfaces created by ASP.NET, I also copy it to the INET-PUB World Wide Web root, WSS, virtual directories 888, which is my web application, _VTI PVT, which maps to the VTI PVT directory here. This is just for testing purposes, not for production purposes. So I saved that. I built my solution, and I deploy the web service. Maybe some of you ask why I'm not using Visual Studio extensions for SharePoint. Well, the point is I'm doing all the stuff with Visual Studio 2008, and unfortunately the team has not released VSES for Visual Studio 2008 yet. Okay, so now we have deployed the web service. We recompile the stuff, which takes some time. And after we recompiled this, oh, that was fast. After we recompiled the site, I open a new tab and go to HTTP VPC base 888 _ VTI PVT restaurants.asmx, enter. So now we are crossing the fingers. Actually, my restaurant's web service is coming back. Get cuisines, and I copy the URL of the cuisines list, copy shortcut, just to test whether the web service is working. Invoke, and actually we get our cuisines from our list back. So now it gets more interesting. We close that one, go back, say get restaurants. We copy the list of the document library with our restaurants. Go to the web service and say Cuisine Classic Austrian, also Wiener Schnitzel mit Erdäpfelsalat. Invoke, and we actually should get back our restaurants from the document library. Here we have them. So we also added a Japanese one, I think. Japanese, invoke. And we get the Japanese one with the boss as their chef. Okay, so now we have the web service in place that reads contents from a document library, which in turn contains Office OpenXML files, and returns them to clients. So that's the point where we switch gears from the server side to the client side and create a Word add-in that consumes the web service, shows contents of the website in a custom task pane, and allows us to create a nice little invitation letter. So that's the next step that we are going to perform now. I have created already the add-in project. The add-in project itself contains a custom task pane that I've created in WPF, so I really tried to unveil my designer capabilities. I hope you like my color gradient. So that one takes a while, although the performance is much better than the one we had in Visual Studio 2005. So that's the task pane. And it allows us to select the cuisines, then search for the restaurants, and then we display the results and insert an invitation to that restaurant that we selected here. So that's basically the idea. And yeah, that's what we have to build now. So as you can see, our add-in is still from scratch. So we start with some prep work, add a service reference, and I add the reference to our web service. But I'm using the classic ASP.NET 2.0 based web services because the cookie handling is a little bit easier there with the WCF based proxies. And we say restaurants proxy, add a reference to that web service. So now we add the web reference, make a little coffee break. I'm getting hungry slowly. I've never said Wiener Schnitzel that much in a session as in this one. So we have the web service proxy, and then we are doing a couple of other things. We are using the .NET 2.0 settings infrastructure to store some settings. For example, the list to the cuisine URL and the list to the restaurant URL and the list to a document template that we are going to insert as a template for an invitation letter. So the template is this one. We are going to use that later one. So I just prepare the setting that I don't need to switch too often between the dialogues. Then we need the URL to the restaurants library. So we copy the shortcut here and store it in our settings. And then we need to copy the URL of our cuisines list and store it in our settings. So save. These are our settings. For our web service, I immediately call it in the VTI bin, which is the one that you should use for the production environment. And yes, that's it. These are our settings. So the next step is we want to create something in the UI. So we say, let's create a ribbon. A ribbon using the Visual Designer, REST ribbon. And this ribbon allows us to enable and disable the task pane and to save the settings that we have stored in our settings in the user profile. So first of all, we change the tab here because we don't want to have this in the add-ins tab. That's very boring. We want to have it in the home tab to be very prominent there. Then we say restaurant invitations, enter. And we add some controls to the restaurant invitations stuff. So we say we have a toggle button, we have an edit box, we have another edit box, we have a button, and the toggle button should actually be of control size large, should have the text show invitation task pane, enter, very long text. Then we need a cool image. This is actually the point where it always gets hard, finding the right image. So let's go to work, start up, photos, enter. Take the thumbnails. Which one should we take? So I'm getting hungry with each one of these. Should we take McDonald's? So I take this one. That one actually looks cool. So, and then we have the save settings, and we have the cuisine URL, and we have the, as a second one, we have the restaurant URL. Okay, so let's start with the show and hide the task pane. Actually, we are in the ribbon. This is a closed black box component, so we say we do some events, event handler, show task pane, and public event handler hide task pane. And here in the toggle button, we say if toggle button 1.checked, else we do something else. So that's not right, Control KD. So if show task pane is not null, then we say show task pane this new event args. And if hide task pane is not null, then we say hide task pane this new event, this new event args. Save that one. Okay, that's the first part of the ribbon. The second part of the ribbon is saving the settings and loading the settings. So we start with loading the settings in the load method. So we say editbox1.text equals properties.settings.default.qzine_url. Editbox2.text equals properties settings default restaurant URL. And in the save button we say properties settings default cuisine URL equals editbox1.text, and properties settings default restaurant URL equals editbox2.text, and properties settings default save. Okay, so this is our ribbon. Now we have coded our ribbon. The ribbon gets displayed automatically when you add it this way using the designer. So the next step would be showing and hiding the custom task pane. So what we actually need is, we need references to the event handlers of our ribbon. So we say globals.ribbons.rest-ribbon.show-task-pane plus equals and create the event handler, and then globals.ribbons.rest-ribbon.hide-task-pane and create another event handler, tap. And in here we should show the task pane, and in the other one we should hide the task pane. So what we need is a custom task pane of the Microsoft Office Tools namespace, CTP. And here we say hide task pane ctp.visible equals false. And here we show the task pane in the show task pane, ctp.visible equals true. Okay. So now we need to have the task pane actually created, ctp equals custom task panes.add. But unfortunately, that one supports only Windows Forms controls. And we want to have a WPF-based control here. So what we are going to do is we create a wrapper for that, add new item of type user control task pane UC. Oh yes, UC, enter. And in this user control, we add an element host. And this element host, we dock it in the parent container. And we select the WPF control that we have in our project. So now we have this one. We make it a little bit larger, so that looks like a cool task pane, hopefully. So, okay. And now we say CTP equals custom task panes dot add new task pane UC and restaurant invites. Okay, save. So now we have created that one, and now we run it. Oh, we cannot run a class library, of course. So we need to set the startup project correctly. Set the startup project, and now we run it just to verify if we are still on track. So Word gets started. And it loads our add-in. It shows help. No, we don't need help. So we have our settings in here, and we can show and hide the custom task pane. But so far, the custom task pane is empty, so it's right boring creating some invitation letters with an empty task pane. So what we do is we call our web service to fill these things in the task pane, and that's actually the next step. So when we take a look at the task pane itself, and take a look at how the task pane is made up, it's a WPF-based control with a drop-down and a list and these buttons. And this list, by the way, uses data templates. So I've created for the list box a data template that we will use to bind our restaurants to the list that are returned from the web service. And the data template contains a doc panel with an image that binds to the image URL. then a text block that binds to the name, to the chef, and to the description, just to know that the binding of the things from the web service is very easy. So when we take a look at our code behind of the task pane control, then I've prepared the code that just clears the items and sets the item source. By the way, there is a little bug in there. Before you can clear any items when using the item source, you need to set the item source to null. Then you clear the items, and then I say item source equals globals.thisaddin. So I need to import this namespace from my add-in, .getCuisines. But this method actually does not exist, so I use Shift-Alt-F10 to generate the method stub for it. The same for the restaurants. So again, we need to have listbox1.itemSource equals null. And we need to generate the getRestaurants method in our this add-in. And finally, we have the insertInvite method. So we need to generate the insertInvite method in our this add-in. And now we are going to implement these methods. So the add-in calls back to the task pane control calls back to the add-in through these methods. So the first thing that we are going to do is we make some exception handling, catch exception, best practices exception handling, message box dot show x.message. And we use our restaurant exception handling building block in our other methods as well. So, okay, getCuisines returns a list of strings actually, not enumerables, string. So list of string Cs equals new, and we return that one. Return Cs, and in here we say Cs. Oh yeah, we need the web service proxy. So we actually, before we can do this, we need to initialize the web service proxy. So I say private restaurant proxy dot restaurant service proxy, and I make a private void init proxy method because we're going to extend that later on. Proxy equals new, proxy.credentials equals system net credential cache default credentials to log in with my current Windows account. Okay, so we need to call the init proxy in the thisaddin startup to have the proxy available in our methods down there. So we say, okay, cs.add range proxy.getCuisines, and it requires as a parameter the list to the cuisine on our SharePoint properties settings default .cuisine URL. So that's it. Then we have a list of restaurants, list of restaurant, Shift-Alt-F10, we need to include the namespace of our proxy. Rests equals new rests, return rests. And now we say, okay, rests.add range, proxy.getRestaurants, and it requires the library, the document library on our SharePoint, properties, settings, default restaurants URL, and the cuisine, which is passed in as a parameter with the speaking name key. Okay, so let's save that one and try if that one works. Oh, I've forgotten something, of course. In our task pane control, of course, we need to import the namespace of the proxy as well. So, Control-Shift-B, build succeeded, hit the 5. Take a coffee break. So, when I show my cuisines now, I can select the cuisine and search the restaurant, and it should actually display the things here. So next, when we click Insert, we want to have a nice little document inserted into our current document that we can send to our family and friends to invite them to a nice little dinner at the end of the day. So that's the idea. So let's close that. And yeah, let's go to Insert Invite, which is called from the control with the selected item in the list, which is a restaurant. Here we need to perform 3 steps. First, insert the template. Second, select the inserted template. Third, walk through content controls. What does that mean? Content controls, they are here in the invitation part, which is actually the template that I'm using for inserting the invitation to for our friends and family. We have a set of content controls: image, name, chef, cuisine, description, city, address, and so on. So what we do is we insert this document into our current document, then we select it and walk through the content controls to initialize it with the contents from our restaurant. So that's the idea. Okay. So let's insert the template. For being able to select the template afterwards, I need to keep track of the current selection. Cell start equals application.selection.start. Then we say application.selection.insert file. And we need the file name, which we have stored in our settings, default template. And then we don't want to specify a specific range in the selection. So this is an optional parameter. And when you develop Office applications with C#, then you will have to write something like this very often. Missing, ref missing, ref missing, ref missing. So fortunately, the VSTO team has defined the type.missing as a static variable on the base class. And then we say, okay, int cell end equals application.selection.start. So now we have inserted the template. We select the template. Application.selection.start equals cell start. Application.selection.end equals cell end. And now we walk through the content controls. For each content control, CTRL in application.selection.content controls. And now the funny part takes place. Switch CTRL.tag, which is the name of the content control. Depending on the content control, we add some different things in here. So case name, break. So we say control.range.text equals restaurant.name. And we need that more often. So we have the name in place, we have the chef in place, dot chef, we have the cuisine in place, we have a description, address, no, city, I think it was, city. So .address.city. So I think you believe that this is going to work. So I skip the others and walk to the image. And for the image, we say control.range.inline_shapes.add_picture. File name is restaurant.imageURL, ref missing, ref missing, ref missing. So we don't want to specify any specific range. We don't want to add it as a link. Yeah. So that's basically it. So let's try if that's going to work out. So we just walk through the content controls and add the content of our restaurant that is selected in the list. So we show our pane, and we say classic Austrian search, and we take, for example, the second restaurant and say insert invite, which actually inserts the invite and initializes all the fields, the content controls that we have taken. So the content controls somehow act as a little contract between my code and the actual document. So we have created the template, and now we can send the invitation to friends and family. So that is one complete round trip, but we are not done yet. Actually, in the last 15 minutes, we want to make this an internet site. Currently, we use Windows authentication all the time because it's easier. But using Windows authentication in the internet is not something that is really, yeah, let's say, the best thing to do. So what we are going to do next is we configure membership API to use forms-based authentication in SharePoint. And then we need to update our web service code to be also aware of the fact that we use forms-based authentication. So what are the steps for using forms-based authentication in SharePoint? First, you need to create, if you use, for example, the default membership API provider of ASP.NET, you need to create a membership database. I have done that already using ASP.NET_Rex SQL. I've also created a couple of accounts in there. Then you need to configure the connection strings in your web application. You need to configure the membership provider in your web application. Then you need to do the same thing for SharePoint Central Administration. And then you need to configure forms authentication through the UI in SharePoint. So these are the 5 steps that we have to complete right now. So we close the thing. We open up an Explorer to browse to our website, inetpub, World Wide Web root, WSS, virtual directories 888 web.config. And we open the web.config of SharePoint Central Administration, which in my case is in the directory 22288. We open it up as well. So we say edit outlining toggle. No, doesn't matter. Anyway, so we add the connection string. Connection strings. Add name equals Mario. Connection string equals data. Source equals local SQL Express. Integrated security equals SSPI. Initial catalog equals ASP.NET-DB. Initial catalog equals integrated security equals. So we copy the connection string to our other web.config, the one of our web application. Save. We go up to the system.web configuration section, system.web. So it ends here, system.web. And in our system.web, we add membership providers. Add name equals restaurant provider, type equals system web security SQL membership provider, then connection string name equals Mario, application name, as you can have multiple applications in the same membership database, restaurant, I think that was. So save that one. And of course, we need to have the default provider configured, restaurant provider. If you forget to configure the default provider and you have finished all the configuration, your SharePoint site would try to create a SQL Express file-based database in SharePoint directory and use this one as a membership database. So this can be very confusing because then he just comes back with an internal error in terms of the server when network service does not have write rights. So don't forget about the default provider. We also need to configure membership in our other web.config, system.web, in the system.web section. So, and then we can fire up SharePoint Central Administration. And have a little coffee break while it's pre-compiling. So that takes a while. Maybe it is afraid of the wind. Here. So application management. Then we go to authentication providers. And here we change the default provider for our web application VPC base 888. So we change the default provider to forms. Enable anonymous access and say a restaurant provider is our membership provider. I think we called it restaurant provider. Yes, restaurant provider. Save. So now we go back to application management and set the site owners for the site. So the old owners does not exist anymore. So we need to add the new owners, and that's the first test of our membership provider. So when I try to search with percentage for users in here, it should actually return the users in my membership database. And we say, okay, admin is the first owner and Mario SZP is the second owner. Okay. So now we have configured the site owners. And when we close, yes, and open SharePoint again, it should actually automatically redirect to my login page. Whoops. And we say password1, sign in. And it should sign me in as admin now. So, okay, forms authentication activated in SharePoint. But the problem that we have actually now is when we go back to our to our VSTO client and try to start it again, it tries to call the web service and it says the request failed with HTTP status 403 forbidden. Because actually it's using cookie-based authentication now. So the forms authentication module on the server watches for a cookie which needs to be included in the request. The cookie is not present, so it says, sorry, you're not logged in. So somehow we need to get to the cookie, add the cookie to our web service request, and send it along with the request to make sure that SharePoint knows that we are authenticated. So that's the last step for this part. And what I've created for completing this, I've created a login form that just captures username and password, and that allows us to log in. So what we need to do is we need to add a reference to HTTP VPC base 888 underscore VTI underscore bin authentication.asmx. So SharePoint includes an authentication web service that allows us to log in using username and password sent along with the web service request, and that then returns a cookie in the return request. So we add a reference to this one, auth proxy, add reference. So it adds the web reference. And now we can use this stuff. So we go back to our add-in implementation and say, okay, the first thing that we need is a private auth proxy.authentication a service. And in the init proxy, we show our login form, lf equals new login form, lf.show dialog, whoops, show dialog. And after we have shown the login form, we can say a service, authentication service proxy equals new. Then we need to create a cookie container to be able to receive cookies in the web service response and to send cookies along with the web service request. And then we say a service.login, which then returns a login result. So we say auth proxy.login result equals a service.login lf.usertext.text lf.passwordtext.text, and yeah, that's the call to the authentication service. Then we create our proxy and we don't need to have the credentials anymore, and we say if result of the authentication proxy equals login error code dot no error, then we need to find the authentication cookie that we need to send along with the other requests against our web services. So we say, okay, auth or a service. So we have a cookie collection. Cookies equals a service, a service dot cookie container dot get cookies for all cookies which have been issued for the a service URL. That one is very important actually. The authentication cookie issues the authentication service issues the cookies for the URL where the authentication service is placed in. That means your website /VTI_bin. That means you have to place your custom web services in the VTI bin directory to be able to use this mechanism. So then we need to find the authentication cookie. Cookie equals cookies of result, and in the login result it returns the cookie name. And then we say proxy.cookie container equals new cookie container proxy.cookie container.add auth cookie, and proxy.pre-authenticate equals true, so that it sends the cookie immediately along with the request. Okay, and otherwise we say messagebox.show unable to log you in plus result.errorcode.toString. Save. And now we should be done. No, we are not done. So what is he saying? The best overload. It takes a URI, new URI as a parameter. Build succeeded. So now we can try whether our forms-based authentication is working even from within our web service. So we say Mario SZP login, calls the authentication service, no error appeared, so it should have been going well, and actually it did. So we can insert our invite for search restaurant, Moe's restaurant, and we have used forms. Oh, that's a large picture. And we have used forms-based authentication by using the authentication service of Windows SharePoint service and calling our own web service that is deployed within SharePoint and accesses our document library. So then there is one last step that we need to complete. Actually, a typical internet site allows users to register themselves with the site, and then a site owner maybe can approve or decline an account. So this is the last step that we want to complete. And we do that to see how we can embed custom ASP.NET pages into a SharePoint site. That's the last thing we are going to do for today. So we close our solution, go down to the restaurants WS. I've prepared a blank ASP.NET page that you can use as a template for simple page extensions. There are actually three things that you need to be aware of. The first one is, in your page directive, you should add a reference to one of SharePoint's master pages. So I'm referring to the same master page here that is used by the sign-in screen, which is in the /layouts/simple.master. If you want to have the full-blown master page with all the navigation in place, then you need to refer to the default.master, or you deploy your own master page within SharePoint. Another thing that you probably might need is a reference to the assembly Microsoft.SharePoint, so that you have access to the SharePoint object model from within the page. And of course, your own assemblies if you need to access your own objects models that encapsulate something, some logic for you. And then you import the namespace, Microsoft.SharePoint, that you have access to the object model. And then you use content controls to place content into several parts of the SharePoint page. So for example, here we have a content placeholder with the name placeholder page title in title area, which is the title. So we say register for this community, or with this community actually. Then placeholder page description. Here we say this page allows you to register with this nice restaurant community. After dinner, the site owner will confirm your account. And finally, you have the placeholder main. The placeholder main, here you can put your own custom ASP.NET controls, out-of-the-box controls, or SharePoint controls. And we use it for the simple case here create user wizard run at equals server, and ID equals main user wizard. So we use the ASP.NET create user wizard. And we rename the page and call it register. Register. So, but we are not done yet. Actually, I could deploy this page to the layouts subdirectory of the web server extensions 12 templates layouts directory. And I could run this page and I could create accounts in my membership database. That would work. But if these accounts then try to access the SharePoint site, they would get you are signed in as, but access is denied error. Because you actually need to assign these users to a SharePoint site role so that they get access to the SharePoint site, actually. And for that purpose, I've prepared another page. So I add an existing item, C work restaurant first, restaurant community, WS, and a page, restaurant user manager, that can be used by an admin. And that page also includes some logic, page logic, and we'll debug through that so that I can explain it. The restaurant user manager page is used by admins of the site to get a look at the users that are in the membership database, select the user and confirm the user for the SharePoint site, which actually means adding him to one of the SharePoint roles. And here I'm using the same template, except that I'm referencing the assembly restaurants WS as well. And I'm using more controls on here in the placeholder main. So I have a grid view that displays the users from the membership database with an empty data template. No users are available. Then I have a drop-down list that shows the available roles in SharePoint, so the roles that are configured for the site. Then I have a button that says confirm member, and the confirm member button is doing nothing else than taking the membership user and creating a role assignment in the SharePoint site for this membership user. So that's actually the thing that we are going to do. I will walk through the code by debugging the code so that you can see how that works as well. So we deploy the solution and then I'll explain the remaining parts. So deploying means that you need to deploy the pages, the ASP.NET pages, to the restaurant, to the C program files, common files, Microsoft Shared, Web Server Extensions 12 template layouts directory. Pages which are containing code, such as the one that we created, need to be placed there. Pages which do not contain code can also be stored in the content databases of SharePoint. For example, by creating them with SharePoint Designer and things like that. So we deploy that one. Deploy. So I'm deploying the pages along with my web service. And restaurant register user is something that I have a little typo, so I need to copy that one manually. Okay, so work, restaurant ticket, restaurant source, restaurant WS, and we copy the user manager to the C program files, common files, Microsoft Shared, Web Server Extensions 12 template layouts. Copy it in here. Okay. So now we close that and reopen it to recompile the site. So we recompile the site now. Then we register a new user. So we say, okay, we go to the register.aspx now, which is our custom page that we just created. Tech add, whoops, pass add word 1, pass add word 1. It's a good idea telling the password to the whole audience. techadd.com, test this, create a user. So it created the user, and actually by default the create user wizard also signs it in. So when I try to go back to the site, it says access denied, please sign in as another user. You are currently signed in, we recognize you, but you don't have a role in the site. So I sign in as admin. and I go to my layouts restaurant user manager.aspx page. Okay, that's the wrong one. How did we call it? It should actually be there. I have forgotten to rebuild the stuff. So let's take a look at the error logs, program files, common files, Microsoft Shared, web server extensions, 12 logs. Go down there, enter. And what we find here, hopefully, is the exception, compile exception, and it will find the type or namespace page logic does not exist. Okay, we close that up. I have forgotten to rebuild after I have added the page logic class, so we build the solution and then deploy the stuff again. So in the global assembly cache, unfortunately, the wrong version of my assembly was registered, but now you have seen how you can capture such errors as well by taking a look at the logs and taking a look at the compile exception. So let's go back and access our page. So I actually wanted to debug through the page. So we say we add a breakpoint, or we already added a breakpoint, and say debug attached to process, worker process, and then we refresh the page, and then we are done. So unblock, I never had to debug before on this machine because everything worked fine. So we refresh the page, enter, and we get back to Visual Studio. We get the website. We verify if the user is an admin, and only if the user is an admin, we display the users in the grid view from the membership database. Then we retrieve the role definitions for our site. Yeah, and add them to our combo. Then we select Teched. Yeah, we don't need this breakpoint anymore. We select Teched and say we want to have him as a contributor, confirm the member. And in confirm member, we get the selected username from the grid, get the membership user, and use our page logic class to add him to the SharePoint site. So we say, SharePoint site, please create a new entry for the user in your definitions, user definitions. Take the role definition that is selected and create a role assignment for the SharePoint login. Be aware that you take the SharePoint user login here because it is prefixed with the membership provider, and assign it, add the role assignment, and then you're done. So when I go back to the site now, which recompiles now again, I log off as admin, sign out, and I sign in as Teched. Sign in. Now I'm signed in as Teched, and I have access to the site as well. So that's the process how you can include the world in your SharePoint site. So with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got hungry a little bit. I'm very hungry right now because I had no breakfast actually. So I hope you enjoyed the session. You got some ideas of how you can solve certain problems in your own applications. And I really, really thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the conference, the remaining conference. Thank you.